Good evening, everyone. Welcome in to the FAAMA podcast. It has been a while. I am Keith Jackson, your Director of Membership Education. It is March 6, 2025. We hope all of you had a really good Christmas holiday season, a good New Year, and we have a lot of updates to get you up to date on. And to help me do that, it is this guy, Ron Eritano of the Normandy Group, FAAMA's Executive Director. Ron, how you doing?
Doing well, Keith, under the circumstances. It's been quite a start to the new year, and as I know, a lot of our members have been dealing with some unique circumstances. So looking forward to catching up with you and everyone on all that's been going on here in Washington.
Yeah, there's to put that there's been a lot going on feels like an understatement. There's definitely been, and we were thinking of doing an update in January. We said, nah, we have a new president coming in, so it's just, we need to wait and see what happens. February, we had a lot of changes come in play. A lot of it has been widely publicized on the news. Some of it is in the courts. But one item, and if we were to try to cover everything, you and I would be here for a very, very, very long time. So we can cut up. Let's get start with one, and that is the five bullets email. What did you do last week? And what really sort of got our attention, along with a few other, a lot of people, was you don't respond. It's taken as a resignation, which got a lot of people worked up.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Keith. It was certainly unprecedented in terms of the way it was rolled out, how it was rolled out, and certainly I think we've heard more from our members on that particular issue than just about any other issue, at least in the last couple of years. It was like I said, a unique way of communicating with employees. A lot of different agencies handled it differently. Obviously being under the Department of Transportation, our leadership we waited for guidance from them. We tried to do the best we could. I know there was a lot of frustration amongst our membership, but really in these unique times, the best, we did the best we could to communicate out to you all. In conjunction with our family leadership, we sent a message around. Hopefully, some of you got a chance to read it, but it really was just about working with your immediate supervisors and trying to figure out what's best for you in terms of how you respond to that. But just know this, we work with a lot of other federal employee groups here in Washington, and we weren't alone in trying to figure out what exactly they were trying to do with this approach, both in our frustration and our uncertainty, frankly, of where to go with this. So we continue to talk with a lot of those other federal employee groups and just getting a better understanding for what they're going through and understanding what we're going through and trying to figure out a way forward through this situation.
Yeah, and when you definitely have other lines of the federal government too go and respond, don't respond, it's sort of added in there to where it was, hey, what are we doing here? And like you said, we all had to just go with our leadership and what frankly, whether it was the DOD, don't do it, DOT saying do it, we just had to go along with it. And yeah, there was a lot. We had a second email come out with the same thing, and now it's a weekly requirement. So best advice and going forward, frankly, is just pay attention to your leadership, do as you're told, kind of thing, right?
I think so, but I'll say this. Earlier today, here on March 6th, President Trump did make a statement that any activity taken by the Doge is suggestions rather than the end all be all, and that each individual agency will be making determinations moving forward on all things personnel related. Now, it was a statement. There's no executive order or memorandum attached to it, but the hope is that with this type of clarification that maybe we'll get a little bit more certainty as this moves forward and what they plan to do in terms of their attempts to slim down the size of the federal government. And I will say this: I interact frequently on FAMA's behalf with a lot of members of Congress, and certainly both parties, members of both parties, have expressed concern at the way some of this has been rolled out. Even if some of them agree with the intention behind the approach of the Doge, they will acknowledge, most of the folks I've talked to, that it probably could have been handled a little bit better. So hopefully today's clarification from the White House will help make this a little more sane moving forward. It's hard to say which way it'll go. Things seem to change by the hour here in DC, but that's the best we can do. The good news is I know our FAMA crew are a resilient bunch, and we'll persevere through whatever situation gets thrown their way.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So yeah, it's a lot more to come, I'm sure, with all the stuff that rolls out. We are definitely working on this every day. So I should say, stay tuned. But let's turn our attention to matters on the Hill, and particularly we have a shutdown that's coming up. We'll get to that in a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about the House Subcommittee on Aviation. They had a hearing, and it was on Tuesday, if I remember correctly. So that's 2 days ago.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, just to back it up a little bit, obviously, with the tragic disaster at DCA in late January, followed by a lot of the complications with federal employees and some other aviation related incidents. Since then, this marked the first hearing by a House or Senate committee on air traffic in the new Congress, in this 119th Congress. So this was the House Aviation Subcommittee, as you mentioned, holding their first hearing. They have a new chairman, Troy Niels from Houston, Texas area, taking the reins, and he worked with the ranking member Steve Cohen to put together a large panel of witnesses. I hope some of you got a chance to see the hearing summary that was should have been distributed if it hasn't yet by your regional directors and chapter presidents. But nevertheless, it was a very detailed summary because it was a very detailed hearing. The hearing in total lasted about 3.5 hours, and somebody who's worked in this town for almost 25 years now, I can attest that it was one of the most detailed discussions I've seen on air traffic in a long time, at least in a while. And there were some heated discussions, good discussions that really, I think, it's hopefully the first of a number of these difficult discussions that need to be had. But things they touched on were things that FAMA's been talking about for a long time. Quickly got to the staffing issue, as you could imagine. And there was a lot of back and forth. I think both parties agreed that staffing continues to be a problem. Both parties agreed that some of the recent activities as it relates to the Doge pushing forth aggressively on federal employees probably isn't the most conducive to helping us address these staffing needs, whether it's recruiting new members or new air traffic controllers or retaining current air traffic controllers. So there was a joint agreement that there's a better way to get the people we need into the system. And then there was a lengthy discussion, as you could imagine, about the technology, the outdated nature of the technology, the rollout of next gen, et cetera. And it was a good discussion. It was a technical discussion. There was a couple of representatives there that were pretty well versed on that technology. And there was also one of the witnesses was a inspector from GAO, the Government Accountability Office, if you recall, they had done a report last year just on the state of the system, and gave a lot of interesting perspective on the state of these systems, the technology that you all deal with on a daily basis, and the need to upgrade it. Now, one good thing that came out of it, and actually was announced right before the start of the hearing, House leadership, both Republican and Democrat, in conjunction with the White House and Secretary Duffy, had you know, made a statement that they would like to increase investment in air traffic across the board, staffing, technology, to a significant degree. We're talking tens of billions of dollars. It was just a statement. There's no proposal quite yet, but they are moving forward with a big reconciliation bill. And while they're trying to cut spending in certain places, it seems like one of those places they're going to try to increase spending. So the devil's always in the details, but it was a good, needed discussion. And again, it was a nonpartisan discussion, which in Washington these days, it doesn't happen all that often. So it was positive to see.
Yeah, that was one big point you said. The bipartisanship was there, and the one thing that was asked, or I should say, has been sort of talked about, was privatization. I think on both sides that does not appear to be on the table for now. Of course, knock on wood, but I didn't hear anything alarming.
Even more so, Keith, you're absolutely right. But even more so, every entity that either served as a witness or serves as a major trade organization here in Washington in the aviation space came out in a collective way to say that now is not the time, nor would they be supportive of any effort to privatize the air traffic control system. And this includes a number of entities that were supportive of it about 7 or 8 years ago when this was tried once before. For a host of reasons, I think everyone's on the same page now that this is not the time to be moving forward with any type of initiative of that sort. So we're happy to see that at FAMA, and having talked to a lot of folks in other parts of the the aviation world. I think we're all in agreement that this is a good approach. Let's not go down that road again.
Yeah. And keeping on with Congress, right now we do need to talk about the more immediate concern that we have, and that comes, I believe, on March 14th when federal funding expires. We didn't feel like we were going to have a shutdown on our last time you and I talked. We felt as if it was going to be a CR. It was just how far into the future were we going to go? And here we come now, March 14th. You hit on the fact that they're doing reconciliations. I guess the first thing is, how is that process? I mean, I sort of have an idea, but how is this process, this form of reconciliation working?
It's a good question. And just to clarify, I mean, it is a separate process from when we talk about government shutdown, CRs and whatnot. Reconciliation really it's a budgetary tool to allow you to move something, a spending related legislative mechanism in a way that you only require 50 vote majority. So any Senate rules on cloture and super majorities and whatnot don't apply. So you get to use it once each budget cycle. So it's usually held out for very large initiatives that are going to have trouble passing. It was used for the passage of the Affordable Care Act many years ago. It was used for the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act just a few years ago. It was used to pass the Trump tax cut of 2017. And it's the primary vehicle for doing that this year. The key part of that, and this is something to flag, I think, for our members, is there is a need that the extension of the Trump tax cuts would expire at the end of this year. It's going to cost roughly $4.5 trillion, give or take a few. I know that's a huge number, right? So one of the things with the new Congress is they want to try to find as many cost offsets as possible, right? And they call them pay fors, is the Washington lingo for it. And one of the things we're just tracking closely is we want to make sure those pay fors don't just fall on the back of federal employees, i.e., through some of your retirement benefits or other changes that could be used as a justification for extending the tax cuts. There's a lot of other places we feel like they could find some pay fors that won't be so detrimental to folks like us and other federal employees.
Yeah, and this isn't, it gets documented every year. It's our, air traffic controllers are working without pay, but the bigger part of it too, we have people that work behind the scenes that everything stops. Nothing gets done. There's no money. And that's in addition to, what goes on and, are you going to get the paycheck or not? None of this work that we talk or hear about is allowed to proceed, at least until there's funding.
Right, and that's a great point. In fact, that this very issue came up in the hearing we just talked about a few minutes ago. Was one of the big problems we have with our staffing shortage issues was just it's hard to get when you don't have a stable stream of funding, whether it's due to government shutdowns or even the threat of government shutdowns. It slows everything down. Whether we're training folks at the academy who then their classes start and they have to start from scratch again, or just training controllers that have already made it through and are in their first year or two on the job. They lose valuable time trying to get up to speed to where we need them to be as fast as possible. So yeah, it definitely has a negative impact. And so here we are, just to kind of get back to your earlier question, Keith. Here we are a week out. As you mentioned, the current CR, which was passed on December 20th, now runs through March 14th, midnight next Friday, and we're a week out, and we're not sure what's going to happen. And I don't say that in jest. It is a concern to me. And part of the problem is, anytime you have a new administration, you're going to be they're focusing on their initial priorities, getting their cabinet members, confirmed. They're focused on, their top priorities. Budget reconciliation process certainly is a top priority in both the House and Senate. So they've been focusing a lot on that. So it's only in the last two or so weeks that there's really been a congressional shift to like, what are we going to do about this CR that expires on March 14th? And again, remember, this is the FY25 fiscal year 2025 budget. So we're at a point where that was typically supposed to be passed by the end of September. They haven't passed it by the end of September in many years, but usually they get it done by December. Now we're into March and we're a week out, and it's still unclear exactly what's going to happen. I can give you some speculation on where we are right now, Keith, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I think of where we are today, I really do wonder if Democrats are going to be in a position to where they want to go on to an extension. We sort of saw that the handshakes and everything last year. I feel like there's a completely different environment right now with where we have to where I feel personally that this is, you have the House, you have the Senate, it's your job.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, I mean, having talked to a lot of Democratic lawmakers in the last couple of days, that seems they seem to be of the sense that they're not in a deal-making mood. And the reality is the margins, as you alluded to, are very small in the House and Senate. I mean, right now the Republicans have a two-seat majority in the House and a three-seat majority in the Senate. Both the House and Senate, even more so in the House, have a very conservative wing of 20 or 25 members that just don't like continuing resolutions or government spending in general. So you're going to lose a couple of them. You always you lose a handful. And so you're probably going to need a couple of Democrats across the aisle to support whatever it's going to be, whether it's a long-term spending bill to take us through the end of the current fiscal year of September 30th, or just a long-term CR, which would just be an extension of where we are right now. That even is going to take probably some Democratic support. But I think to your point, Keith, what we're hearing now is most Democrats are not willing to cross the aisle this time. They've done it a bunch in the last couple of years. They're using this as a point of leverage and probably their only point of leverage in being in a minority in both the House and Senate to push back on some of the activities that DOJ is taking against federal employees and other things. So I think that the most likely scenario is a long-term CR passed strictly along party lines if the president and his party leadership can keep everyone in line, which again is a big if that runs through the end of fiscal year 2025, which is September 30th of this year, and then we're back doing this again come fall. But I guess that's a better alternative than a shutdown, which is the other way this could go. And I think that's really our two options at this point. There's not going to be a full funding agreement. Would it be helpful though to explain what that means, though, having a long-term CR, Keith?
I think so because the other point too that I'm just, when at least on what I see in the news too is that the House and Senate version bills are far apart and what impacts that would be. But absolutely, please.
So, a CR, continuing resolution, is you're funding the government at the previous year's funding level, right? So these are FY24 funding levels. So when we talk about slowing things down, right, whether it's, because of a shutdown, it's not just because of a shutdown. It's also because your spending priorities are based on spending priorities from the previous year, which, could be the amounts are different. Maybe you wanted to spend more on something and less on something. It's making sure maybe you have a new system that can't get funded because you haven't had a chance to get that funding in place because the current fiscal year isn't aligned. So it's not an ideal thing. I mean, I know it's not our world, i.e. FAAMA, but the DoD is, Department of Defense is not a fan at all of a long-term CR. It's only happened, I believe, 3 or 4 times in U.S. history that you had a full year CR like this. And I think the last time was like 2012, 2013 timeframe. So it's happened, but it's rare and it's usually disliked strongly by just about every federal agency, the FAA included. So not an ideal solution, but I get better than a long-term shutdown. So it does look like there are options right now. I mean, there's always a potential that a short-term shutdown leads to a come to Jesus moment, excuse the phrase, but for everyone to get at the table and find a better solution. But given how hyper-partisan things seem to be these days, I think it's either or. And right now, a week out, it's hard to predict which way it goes.
Yep, I hear you on that. And I think that that sort of is a good way to close this out to where we are working hard. We are talking to representatives and senators on both sides of the spectrum, of the political spectrum, to tell them how disruptive any government shutdown would be, particularly with where we are today. So that's we're going to be like you. I think you have. We're going to send an update out tomorrow, and then we're going to be watching things as we get rapidly closer to the 14th. And if we need to jump back on, hopefully we don't have to. Hopefully the next time you and I chat, we're not, we're still funded. But if needs be, you can count on the fact that we're going to be advocating, educating, and communicating every aspect of what this might do to our workforce.
Absolutely, Keith. Absolutely. And I would just close from my perspective. As you referenced, we do plan on sending updates along to our membership. It'll come down through your leadership ranks, on down through your chapter presidents, et cetera. But if you need more information, my contact information will be on that sit rep that goes out tomorrow. And feel free to reach out if you have questions. I know there's a lot of uncertainty and people are concerned and worried and whatnot. So whether it's the shutdown, anything coming out of the administration, anything coming from Congress, we really appreciate you all reaching out to us to let us know how you're personally being impacted. And then vice versa. We'd love to have as many of you reaching out to members of Congress as possible. There will be a call to action. There's always a call to action to help us in this effort. Your leadership team, led by President Mike Smith and Vice President Wayne Hubbard, and your whole legislative team, and your communications team led by Keith. We've got a good group of leaders that push very hard daily for members of FAAMA. But this is a time when we need all hands on deck. So I welcome everyone's participation in this process, and I'll continue to encourage you to do so. So thank you, Keith, for your time, though.
Yep, absolutely. And if we do have to do that call to action, trust me, it's not just ignored. There is a reason behind it. So hopefully we don't have to talk about that. If we do, you will see me back on this channel sooner rather than later. Hopefully next time we can talk after the directors meeting in April with another update. Ron, thank you again for taking the time tonight to jump on here. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. You're up to date. Hopefully we don't have to see each other until April, but if we need to, as I said, we will be back on here giving you updates on what is coming up through the 14th. Until that time, adios.